Hey there, I'm Sarah Hodges, and this is Executives Uncut, the podcast where we provide solutions for the corporate cycle of hell. Now, today, we're talking all about successfully working remotely, which is something most of us are experiencing at this point in the pandemic. And I am so grateful to be here with Keith Meyerson, Senior Director of Talent and OD. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really thrilled to be here. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, we actually just met randomly over LinkedIn. I think I reached out to you to connect and, developed a rapport, and I learned about how seamlessly you guys have transitioned and pivoted your team to working remotely during the pandemic. Can you tell us your secret sauce?
It's funny because a lot of this really isn't secrets. I think for many of us out here, this is the normal way we know we should be doing business if we were only allowed to, right? If we had the leadership support. So, from an L&OD perspective, we had to turn on a dime and make sure all of our assets were digital, and we're in a call center environment for the majority of our employees. So we went from a physical call center to a virtual call center, and we had to support people working from home with thin clients. And then because of the nature of our business, we actually grew during the pandemic. So, and we're
Wow.
we're in financial services. So, obviously finances were of a concern to many people, and because of the space we're in, we were able to offer up support where other organizations couldn't. So we grew. So we had to go from in classroom agent training to Zoom calls and remote training. And, fortunately for us, our instructors and our instructional designers were prepared to pivot immediately and support that from a business perspective. So we were thrilled that we were in the position to execute on what we've always wanted to deliver.
Wow, that's great. So you guys were already kind of poised and ready to go from a business perspective. What about on the soft skills side? What do you think you did differently to help your company transition with ease while retaining a great culture?
Yeah, one of the foundations or the hallmarks of who we are as an organization are is in our values. They're not just words on a wall. They're things that we weave through everything we do, and they're really plain spoken, right? So some of them are, servant heart, or no drama, or walk the walk, right? So for us, it was really about trusting our employees and creating that atmosphere where we gave them the guardrails so they knew what they were empowered to do for themselves and for those that they supported either internally or externally. So I think it just revealed our true character as an organization rather than us having to pivot and say, oh my God, how are we going to upskill immediately to make people comfortable with this? I think we've done a good job culturally hiring people that want to help others succeed, whether that's our colleagues or our customers. So I think culture plays a big part in that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had an atmosphere of servitude in a really good way where people knew how to help the overall culture and already understood the lanes in which they could best operate so they could continue doing that no matter what kind of environment it looked like. Am I hearing
Exactly.
that?
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
summary.
Well, but now, in a remote environment, it becomes different. It becomes harder to continue to foster those relationships and to foster that trust. How have you guys pivoted in your approach?
I think the way we engage with our teammates is more purposeful. I think a
Mm.
lot of people, when we're inside brick and mortar, we had the value of just running into people in the halls and having those impromptu conversations. I mean, I can attest to more than one impromptu hallway conversation that resulted in solving a business problem, right? It
Oh,
wasn't
absolutely.
right. It's not a scheduled
Yeah.
meeting. So,
Right.
there's some in leadership that miss that. So I think we've had to be more intentional about how we interact with each other, when we interact with each other, scheduling more touch points, or having places to aggregate. So we have a talent management platform, and we have communities of practice, and we encourage people to go in and um, talk about anything. So it's not just work related. It could be things like, how are you managing the day to day with having kids at home and trying I hate saying multitask because everybody's proven there is no multitasking. You're just, you're focusing on many things and many times.
Yeah, you're switching back and forth.
You're switching back and forth, right?
Yeah.
So how does that work? And if you're that person and you have kids, how are you managing your workload versus managing their schoolwork? And more importantly, if you're a leader, how are you making that okay for your employees to not feel bad about living a life?
Right.
So, right, I mean, that's the reality. And the most important thing, I tell people all the time, I'm an employee as much as I am a manager. So
Mhm.
I want to treat people the way that I want to be treated. So I expect people to have doctor's appointments or have to go run errands or have to do school time or feed their newborn. I mean, I mean, and I'm sure you've experienced this. I mean, how many Zoom calls? How many of us had Zoom calls where the babies are sitting on the lap now, right? Because if we don't do that, then they have to be on mute because of all the screen. So it's
Right.
just, I think it's shown us and everyone else that we have to be more human and humane, right? And really put
Mhm.
that word back in human resources. I
Yeah.
think that's critical.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you said, you're more intentional about seeing the human and seeing their experience, and really that requires managers and other employees to increase those touch points and to ask questions that they may not ask in a hallway passing by, right? Like,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, and be open and
Mhm.
flexible, right? Those are key things.
Absolutely.
So, there are conversations that I get into that normally from an HR perspective, we would say, well, why are you discussing this at work? Well, if I have to take 5 or 10 minutes because your infant's sitting on your lap and I need to make sure that you're okay and this is a good time, or maybe we need to reschedule, right? Or what's going on in your life? What's stressing you out? um, I think that just helps develop and strengthen that relationship between me and my colleagues and the people that we lead.
Yeah, and then what does that do for your organization? Because I think sometimes executives hear, "Okay, great, I strengthened the relationships," but what's the ultimate objective? What do you think is the ultimate objective for you to do that?
Well, I would say the ultimate objective is ROI, right?
Exactly.
We're
Yep.
we're in business, and even on the L&OD side, uh, the business doesn't care about Kirkpatrick levels of evaluation. The business
Mhm.
cares about, are you solving my business problems, right? Are you
Yeah.
increasing sales? Are you reducing risk? Are you increasing compliance? Whatever is important to the business, we need to connect those dots. So if I can have a more trusting, empowered, confident, comfortable, valued workforce, we're going to be able to connect those dots and get the yield we need. And I can tell you from all of our KPIs, we're having and I hate to say this for people that are watching that aren't in a similar position, we're having a record-setting year. We
Nice.
are we are our growth is double digit. Net sales are up, net profits are up. I mean, we're in a really good place. So it's a combination of a lot of factors, but I think a large portion of that has to deal with how your people feel and how much when we talk about engagement, right, as that discretionary effort, we're seeing that effort come back into the business and yield the results we're looking for.
That's so awesome to hear because sometimes it's difficult to draw that linear line, that connection between valuing your employees as human beings and then seeing the output and the ROI on the other end. And the fact that you're seeing that, I think lends a lot of credibility to the fact that this approach works.
And I think for most of us, it's intuitive. If you treat people better but at the end of the day, leadership always wants to show me the numbers, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at, and everything's data analytics now, right? Data science is like the biggest growth industry. So
Mhm.
as an L&OD professional, I'm support. I'm a cost center. I'm not revenue generating. I have to show my value and my impact. And if I'm not, I should keep my resume updated, right? That's kind of how I look at my role. So we have our eye on the end in mind. So everything we do resonates with the business because it's not just an intuitive conversation, it's a data-driven conversation.
Yeah, well, that makes me wonder, let's say there's an executive out there who's listening that's wondering, man, how is the trust level? How is the culture at my organization? What do you recommend is the best way for them to evaluate that?
Well, I think there's some industry standards that we're all aware of as far as doing engagement surveys and things of that nature, and that that helps. Most people do that on an annual or a semi-annual basis. I think pulse surveys are even more important because you want instant access to that immediate response. How are you feeling? I think skip level meetings are a great way of understanding where people are and giving them a safe space to discuss things and understand. We're not looking for an I gotcha. We're out looking to make sure everyone feels um, trusted and valued, and that if something is off, we need to pull people back inside the lane so everyone is rowing in the same direction. I'm splitting my analogies here, but yeah, the point is, I think, talking to your people and really having them feel comfortable in expressing their true views. And my team knows we have this conversation all the time. Don't come to me with something unless you've gone to your boss first, right? If it's a couple levels down, because I believe in the chain of command. But if you're not getting where you want, or you're not getting the answer that you want, as long as you've gone to that person first, absolutely escalate it. So we encourage that. Plus, as I said, we do skip levels, we do town halls, we provide a lot of avenues for discussions, the community of practice, as I mentioned before, where people can go in and discuss these things amongst themselves. I think all give us an idea of where we stand from an employee engagement perspective.
Those are all great tools. And I'm wondering too, because you look at all of this through a very unique lens based on your vast experience with learning and talent management systems. Do you think that that's helped you, or how has that helped you make this transition?
I think it helps me in that this is just my opinion, compared to some of my colleagues in the learning or training profession. I'm not siloed in learning or training.
Mm,
I'm talent management, so it really is learning, performance, and succession. And everything I do is viewed through the lens of business metrics and
ah,
impact.
mhm.
So that in and of itself, if we're able to deliver on those metrics, we get the credibility. So understanding the interrelation between those disciplines and what my clients are looking for, and marrying those two together, really gets us where we need to be.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering about. It's like you've been able to use technology with a very empathetic perspective, right? Putting yourself in the recipient's shoes and wondering how can we utilize technology to make them feel a certain way or to have a certain experience. And I'm wondering if that's helped you over Zoom, right? To put yourself naturally in the shoes of what the other person is consuming or hearing or experiencing.
Yeah, it's the cobbler's children, right? That story,
Yeah.
right? So we're we're learners as much as the rest of the organization is. So we're involved in Zoom calls, and I put my team through DDI certification this year, and it was the first time in DDI. DDI, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is a leadership development organization, and we were in order to leverage their content, you have to be a certified facilitator. And that's usually done in person. But because of COVID, this was the first class they had to pivot and do remotely via Zoom. So
Wow.
it was an eye-opening experience for everyone, and how to leverage breakout rooms as an example, which we've never had to do. So when we pivoted and we were teaching coaches, internal coaches, on our coaching methodology and leveraging Zoom, the overwhelming feedback was, well, we came in thinking this was going to be a terrible experience, because how am I going to learn, and how am I going to collaborate, and how am I going to share? Well, we leveraged the tools that Zoom provides, so the experience was better than they expected, more impactful and
Nice.
enjoyable. So it's great to be able to marry technology with strategy. And it's funny, it's the tail wagging the dog conversation, right? You never want to build your strategy based on technology, because then you handcuff yourself. However, if you're investing in technology, you need to leverage the features and functionality, or else you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So even with our talent management system, it's really understanding what processes migrate over to technology well, what processes do we need to change to provide a better and more efficient user experience given the platform that we have.
This is awesome. You're already giving us amazing tips, and I haven't even asked for our 3 tips yet. So that's so great. So let's segue into that. I know you have 3 prepared tips for executives who want to start building trusting relationships remotely with their staff. Can you walk us through them?
Sure. So the first tip is something that shouldn't be rocket science to anyone. We talk about this in management 101, right? Providing a comfortable and trusting atmosphere for your employees to thrive, right? But what does that look like in reality? So
Mhm.
for me, the majority of my team are salaried individuals. They're exempt. So we manage to the project. We don't manage to a time clock. So the way that helps with trust, and we talked about this earlier, you have a life. I don't
Right.
expect you to ask me for permission to take off to go to the doctors or to take an extra lunch break because you need to help your child with their studies. Do
Right.
it. You don't need to ask me. You're an adult. It just drives me nuts in classroom training when I see hands go up and yes, can I help you? Can I use the lavatory?
Like
It's
you're
not a prison. You can go. You're an adult. Help yourself, right? But that's the same way. How do I treat people the way I want to be treated? Don't ask me for vacation. Tell me you're taking vacation, but let's talk about your project. Where are you? Now,
yeah,
the flip side of that is if you're going to, work 4 hours one day and then the next day tell me you're going to be late on a project, that's a different conversation. You're obviously not
sure.
managing your priorities correctly, but
Mhm.
you get the benefit of both. You get that flexibility. Now, as an employee that has that relationship, that's how I'm managed. It's just a huge sigh of relief. I know
Oh
my
yeah,
boss trusts me. They have my back. I want to go the extra mile for my boss. So we see that
that's great.
happening, right?
Hmm.
I've had to train my team. Look, if you see an email from me at 3 a.m., it's not because I expect you to respond at 3:01 a.m. It's
Right.
because I my hours are all over the place depending upon what's going on with my life, and we should be flexible for that.
Awesome.
So
Those are
that's tip
great
one.
tips. I love it.
Um, Tip two.
Cool. Yeah, let's move on. You got
Okay.
this.
I think especially now, it's more important that we clearly define our roles. I think it's very easy, especially over email or Teams or whatever messaging service we use, for information to not get passed the way it's intended. So, for people to
Absolutely.
understand their roles, their lane, what they're responsible for, kind of plays into the first tip, which is can't hold you to a project if you don't know what your commitment is or your portion of that project is.
Very
And
true.
along with that, I would also say focus on development opportunities because going back to how do we measure engagement, typically whenever we do an engagement survey, the highest level of responses to every engagement survey in the number one or number two spot has to do with I wish I had more training and development, right? That's just universal. And then
Right.
we give them more training and development and then we hear, oh, we don't have time for that, we have to, right? It's the same battle that we have, right?
Yeah.
So being more selective and directive in our training opportunities. So what we've done is we've created competency models for every single position based on the job profile or the job description. So
Nice.
every role in the organization has a behavioral based competency model. That competency model is in our talent management system, and because it's truly integrated, people can go in and take an assessment to see where do I stand now, or more importantly, if I want to grow my career either vertically or horizontally, where are the gaps? So if I want to go from this role in this division to a different role in another division, how how do I build a development plan? Well, because we have an integrated system with these competency models, people can go and take an assessment. And if you and I were, say, we both wanted to be the COO and we both went in and took the assessment, we would both get different development plans with different resources because of our
That is
unique experiences.
cool.
It is.
Wow, Keith,
It
that
is.
is really cool.
So I think it's great because then people can focus on the things that are of most interest and most important to them. And because it's in our talent management platform, from a workforce analytics perspective, we now have insight into the interests, the skills, the talent of our workforce to say, okay, we have a future need here. Here's where people are, or you know what? Based on succession planning, I can put them into a talent group and push out development to them as well. So there's a lot of ways to keep people engaged and working on career progression, because it's very easy for us to forget about that and everyone go heads down, work from home. I got to get my work done and that's the end of it. No, it's not the end of it. We still have to grow the organization and grow future leaders. So I think that's a huge benefit to us focusing on that area.
These tips are a gold mine. I can't wait to hear number 3. This is awesome.
Okay, number three. So number three is more intentional. It's things that we should do anyways as managers and leaders in the organization, but I think it's more important from a work from home aspect. And that's really engage your workforce in conversations and solutions to problems. You know, there's the old adage, the person closest to the problem is closest to the solution, right? So even though as a leader of a department, I might have my view on the strategic direction or how I want to approach something, it's smart of me, number one, to ask my team what their thoughts are, because I'm so removed from some of these issues. My framework might be skewed, right? So I really, just from a
Absolutely.
business perspective, it behooves me to engage them. From a trust and engagement perspective, they're now involved in shaping whatever tactics we apply to complement that strategy. So they buy into it, they feel heard, they feel empowered, and there's this two-way dialogue or multi-way dialogue because we're involving more people in the conversation. So we're being more efficient, we're being more productive, and on the employee side, I tend to feel, because this is the way I feel, I love it when my boss calls me and says, I have this going on at the leadership level. I just need someone to bounce this off of. And I know you and I think differently. Let's have
Cool.
that conversation. So not only does she get a different perspective, but I feel I've been heard. And at the end of the day, and I had a leadership meeting this morning where the words coming out of my mouth were, I absolutely disagree with this course of action, but I will support it 100%. And she's laughing, right? It's okay to have those disagreements, as long as at the end,
Yeah.
I feel she heard what I had to say, but she still didn't go that direction. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
love
working
it.
as a team really means, is just feeling heard and feeling that my boss wants to listen.
Yeah, these tips are amazing, and especially that last one really resonates with a lot of our values and what we teach here at Hodges Coaching. Like our coaching challenge is for this week is very similar to that, and we just want everybody listening to challenge yourself this week that when you're speaking with your team remotely, ask more questions. There people are used, and you'll probably agree with me on this, Keith. People are used to consuming information on TV, and their brains just shut off. They take it in. So if you want engagement, you have to invite them to participate. And the benefits of that are amazing because, like you were saying earlier, they'll feel heard.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's
Awesome.
that's why we use our talent management platform for that as well. You know, we tell our community leaders, don't just blast information.
Yeah,
Ask the question. It's like use it like LinkedIn. I mean, how many of
that's
us
good.
use LinkedIn and we'll see a blog and we'll make a comment? And even if we don't comment, if we read through those, you're going to see different perspectives and opinions that you may not have ever considered.
Absolutely. I love it. These were amazing tips. Thank you so much for offering your perspective and helping us learn from your experience. Where can our viewers find out more about you or connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter, and it's at Keith Meyerson. It's Keith Meyerson on LinkedIn and at Keith Meyerson on Twitter. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about these topics. And I'm not in consulting anymore. So if anyone's saying, okay, how much is this going to cost me? It's not going to cost you anything. You know, this is
Love
like
it.
this podcast. We're here to share information with colleagues and learn from
Yeah.
each other, just like we do on social sites. So I'm happy to engage with anyone that feels it would be beneficial.
Awesome. So Keith is offering free advice if anyone didn't hear that clearly.
If
Just
anyone thinks it's useful, I'm more than happy, because I have my opinions and other people may have other opinions. I'm just one voice in the crowd, so I'm happy to share.
but a very valuable voice. And I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to everyone for tuning in to this episode of Executives Uncut. And if you enjoyed this content and you found it helpful, make sure to subscribe and share Keith's words of wisdom with someone who could benefit from this talk. You can also visit hodgescoaching.com for new episodes or follow us at Hodges Coaching on social media. We did just open up a Twitter, but there's nothing on it yet. So look for that in the future. I'm Sarah Hodges. Thanks again, and I will see you next week.